Hi, and welcome to Health Vision, WOUB's program on medicine and health. I'm Jackie Wolf, Associate Professor of Social Medicine at Ohio University. Today we're talking to Barbara Katz Rothman, Professor of Sociology at the City University of New York, about prenatal testing. Barbara is the author of many books, including The Tentative Pregnancy, How Amniocentesis Changes the Experience of Motherhood, and Weaving a Family, Untangling Race and Adoption. Barbara, it is so nice to have you back here again.
Oh, it's great to be back.
Explain what prenatal testing is.
Prenatal testing refers to the entire array of medical exams, tests, procedures that are focused on testing the fetus. So not maternal blood pressure, not a quality of the woman.
So it's not prenatal care. This is something that's part of prenatal care sometimes, but it's
different.
It's
right. Your focus is what they're calling the fetal patient. That you're focusing on the fetus. So ultrasounds that examine the fetus to see, if all its parts are there and appropriately growing. Blood testing that is designed to find fetal protein in maternal blood. Amniocentesis, all of the testing that is to get information about the condition of the fetus rather than the woman.
And when people think of prenatal testing, what they think most specifically about is amniocentesis and a newer test, chorionic villi sampling. Let's explain what those are in a little bit of detail. Amniocentesis, what is the process of, and what exactly are doctors doing and getting out of the woman and looking at when they do an amniocentesis?
When they do an amniocentesis, people must just call it an amnio. They get the fluid that surrounds the baby. So they take a needle and puncture the uterus through the maternal abdomen. You go through her belly into the womb. Let's use English, okay? You go through the belly into the womb. Take the water. When the water breaks, that water, you take that water. In that water, amniotic fluid, are fetal cells. Sloughed off your skin. Okay, so there's cells from the baby, and then you can do genetic testing. It started with very simple when genetic testing involved just cutting and pasting to check which chromosomes were there, so that you could see if there was the extra chromosome that indicated Down syndrome or other chromosomal anomalies. We've certainly gotten more sophisticated in what you can test for. Chorionic Villus sampling can be done a bit earlier, though they're doing amnio so early now.
No, really, I wasn't aware of that. Amnio normally was done around the 16th week. Is that right?
Well, when they started, it was like closer to the 20th, 19th week, whatever. They moved it back. Was 16th, 14th, 12th. Chorionic Villus sampling goes in and gets what's called a chorionic villi, that sort of placental material. And goes in vaginally and gets that. But the same concept here is that you're looking at fetal cells.
And when they're actually looking at these cells, let's explain too, they're looking for genetic anomalies. They're looking for, you mentioned Down syndrome.
Down syndrome, increasingly we've got a much more specific, this started off, I'll tell you, the first time I went and saw this, it looked like kindergarten projects because you were cutting and pasting and matching up little pairs of chromosomes. It was very sophisticated technology, but at the end there was somebody with scissors, and you were matching up that there were 2 of each chromosome, and if there were 3 of a chromosome, there's supposed to be 2. If there were 3, that's a trisomy, and Down syndrome is a particular trisomy. There are others. Some trisomies are incompatible with life. The fetus would die soon anyway. So it started off with a fairly crude kind of testing. We now have hundreds of genetic conditions you can test for. So if you have the fetal cells, you can run amazingly sophisticated testing now about genetic conditions.
We should make the point, however, though, even though there are hundreds of different anomalies they're looking for, that when someone, I often have friends say, oh, I've had my amnio or I've had my chorionic villi sampling, the baby's fine.
Yeah, right. And no testing is going to tell you the baby's fine. Partly because in some ways that's the least of your troubles, right? I mean, raising a child, things happen. So you can never, I've heard women say, oh, I would never have a pregnancy without an amnio because I just know I could never raise a child with mental retardation. And well, I hope you're right, but you might find yourself doing that anyway.
You might have a child in a terrible auto accident.
Babies fall off the changing table. Stuff happens. Life is really tricky. So you can't say I could only raise certain kinds of children and therefore I'm doing this and now I'm safe, because life is not safe. And lots of things are intrinsically problematic, wrong, errors that we don't have tests for. Things go wrong in the course of pregnancies, things go wrong early on. Nobody's going to guarantee a safe baby.
Sure. I mean, there are no guarantees just because
there
you
are
get
no
prenatal
guarantees.
testing.
Welcome to life.
Let's talk about Down syndrome specifically, because that was one of the first that was one of the first sales points to women, because the one genetic abnormality that actually rises as a woman's age rises is the incidence of Down syndrome.
Well, actually, other genetic anomalies do too, but that was one in particular that.
So that women are told that after the age of 35, now that we should back up a minute, there is a risk to prenatal testing, that when you stick a needle in an abdomen, for instance, or when you snip off a little bit of the chorionic villi, there's a slight risk of causing a miscarriage.
A miscarriage, or creating a problem which then leads to a premature birth, which then leads to the same kinds of mental and physical problems that you would have had if you'd had the condition they were testing for. Yes, there is a risk.
Which is why women are told that you should wait. When you should really have prenatal testing is after the age of 35 and after, because then the risk of some of these genetic problems rises above the level of the risk of miscarriage. Is that the way it's?
Yeah, they say it that way, but it does have an amazing apples and oranges quality to it. These things are not comparable. So if you take a woman whose just greatest fear in life is that she would have a child with mental retardation. She wakes up in fear of this since she was 2 years old, whatever, okay? That's what she's afraid of. She's having her fourth baby. In the course of that, she's had 2 miscarriages. She thinks miscarriages are sad, but they happen. And she's 28. To tell her that the risk of miscarriage is greater than the risk of a child with Down syndrome, so what? You take another woman who, if she has a miscarriage, she's going to grieve for the rest of her life. This is going to be a dead baby in her life. It's a horror. If she has a child with some mental retardation, she's got a cousin with some mental retardation, and he works at McDonald's, and he's a nice kid, and he's having a happy life. To tell her, well, at this age, these 2 risks are this. What does one thing have to do with another? So very few of us make our risk decisions based on the moment at which risks of 2 totally unrelated things happen to equal the same number.
Well, this is the reason that you've often said that when you're making decisions about prenatal testing, this is really a social decision, not a medical decision. This is probably one of the reasons that you put it that way.
It's always a social decision. It's a social decision because the meanings of these conditions are socially determined. And what does it mean to have, I mean, there are a couple of conditions in which the baby is physically in enormous pain, and you can't fix it. But mostly what you're looking at is, this is kind of one of the examples I give to people, is what if the same day you got, whatever the diagnosis is, you also won the lottery? So the baby had a neural tube defect and was going to need a wheelchair or crutches for the rest of its life. But you also just won $15 million.
And you have unlimited funding to take care of this child.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think about that? And the meaning of a condition is so socially, really narrowly unique. What's available in your community? Where do you live? Who do you know? And also kind of unpredictable.